Greetings, Saints. Today is day 294 of our Bible reading plan, and our focus will be on the book of Mark, chapter 14, which is very rich in content. If this was a soccer match, it would be a preview or a build-up to the ultimate event, which is Jesus' crucifixion. And we find many stories of what happened prior to that. One of the things that we find is that it was during the time of the Passover, which was a widely celebrated event by the Jews. And the leaders at the time who wanted to kill Jesus were against the idea of killing him during such a festive period. What we find in this chapter, we firstly find a woman who comes with an expensive perfume and anoints Jesus just before his arrest, killing, and eventual burial, much to the disapproval of people who saw it. But according to Jesus, she did what was appropriate for the occasion. We also find the sellout, Judas Iscariot. He starts thinking, plotting about how he's going to sell out the Messiah, Jesus Christ. And what we also find in this chapter is that Jesus has the Last Supper with his disciples. And in this Last Supper that he has, he makes a prediction, a very strong prediction, that one of you is going to betray me. Each one of them asked Jesus, "Is it me? Is it me?" And Jesus pointed out that there is going to be one person who will betray him. More than that, he also goes on to predict that the disciples are going to be dispersed because they will strike the sheep and they will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. Another prediction that Jesus makes is that Peter, who is one of the closest disciples that he had, was going to deny him, forsake him at such a crucial time. And that Peter also refused, and he didn't believe that it was going to happen like that. It was in this period where they had the Last Supper, where Jesus broke bread and said, and gave it to them and said, "This is my body." And he also took a cup and gave it to them, and he said, "This is my blood of the new covenant." And this is where we find the idea of the new covenant and the Holy Communion as we know it today. After that, Jesus goes on to have a special prayer, a last prayer really, with just a few of his disciples. He took along with him James, John, and Peter. And as they were there, he also went a step further to pray alone. He came back, he found them asleep. He rebuked them and encouraged them because the time was very difficult. He went back again to pray to the Lord. And what was his prayer at this last moment? His prayer was simple. And it was this time where we find Jesus to be distressed, very much uncharacteristic of him throughout the whole book that we have read. And Jesus makes a plea to the Father that if possible, this cup should be taken away from me. However, let thy will be done, which is a very powerful statement that he said. After that, he went to the Garden of Gethsemane, and that is where the leaders came and arrested him in the midst of his disciples, who later were dispersed as he predicted. Jesus was taken to trial, where he was thrown in with numerous accusations, some of them ridiculous, saying that he said that he will destroy the old temple and build a new one in just 3 days. Some were coming up with all sort of accusations and not agreeing on anything really. But at the end, they just had to crucify him because they wanted to crucify him. Jesus went on to admit that he was the Messiah. And at that point, that is when they were crossed and they thought he was being blasphemic in his words and in how he is saying he's the Messiah. And that angered the leaders at the time. After his arrest, he was condemned to death. They did all sorts of things to him. They blindfolded him, they spat on him, they beat him, they mocked him, they humiliated him. And after that, Peter, who was following closely to find out what was happening, was asked if he knows who this Jesus Christ is, and 3 times he denied Jesus Christ, just as Jesus Christ had predicted. And that brings us to the end of this chapter. My favorite verse is verse 36, where Jesus is praying to God. And it's a very, very intense prayer where he says, "Abba, Father," he cried out, "everything is possible for you. Please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine." I like this verse in particular because it shows that Jesus, although he was suffering and he felt the intensity of the excruciating pain that was about to come, but even though he felt that, he still felt that the will of God is the one that should be done. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you join us as we further discuss this chapter on our Zoom discussion. You will find the link in the description below. Amen.